Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm James Milan. This is Town Manager Update for this week, and I'm talking to Adam Chapdelaine. Adam, we took a little bit of a break last week where we got to talk to our Health and Human Services Director, Christine Bongiorno, and that was great. Nice to have you back, though.
Glad to be back, although I heard Christine really enjoyed it, and she might be filling in for me a little more regularly, which I think would be a nice balance for the community to hear differing perspectives.
I quite agree. You know, I enjoy your company, but I do think it's a great idea, and I'm glad that she's enthusiastic about it. We look forward to integrating her more regularly into these conversations. Anyway, let us start, as we always do, with latest COVID messaging, as well as just kind of analysis of what's going on here. So I leave the floor to you.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, more than ever, I think leading with COVID-19 is important. It's been a long stretch of weeks that we've talked about how we're either in or entering this second wave or this second surge, and we are most definitely in it. Both as a region, as a state, and here in Arlington, we're seeing case counts continue to surge. All of November, we had just about 180 cases. Now, just past the midpoint of December, we're up over 170 cases for the month. So, I think that pretty clearly demonstrates the trend is not moving in the direction that we want it to move in. And it's unfortunate that this second surge is coming right as we're getting all this news about the vaccine, because the light is at the end of the tunnel, but we've got some hard work left to do before we actually reach that light. So this week, as I think most people in Arlington have probably heard, we did join a regional group, which has put forth a series of local rollbacks. As I think I said to you a few weeks ago, we really want the governor and the state to lead in this regard. We really think the state should be rolling back their reopening plan further than what they have done. But absent action from the state, and in light of what we're hearing from local hospital leaders in Boston about their capacity and specifically their intensive care unit, their ICU capacity, we feel strongly that action needs to be taken to try to reduce transmission. So joining Boston, Newton, Somerville, Winthrop, Brockton, we decided to roll back to phase 2, step 2, of which the major impacts in Arlington will be the closures of fitness centers and gyms, their closing of movie theaters, which will have some impact on the region, although I think the capital was pretty much closed even prior to this rollback. And with some limited impacts on restaurants in terms of capacity for indoor dining. And we do so fully understanding the seriousness of telling fitness studios and gyms and the Regent Theater that they need to close. We're working through both the release of CDBG funds and as well as looking at the COVID-19 relief fund and seeing what we can put together to help out these businesses get through it. We're definitely desperately in need of a larger federal stimulus package, which seems to be on the precipice of being approved, as well as state relief for these businesses. So we don't, we make these decisions well aware of those impacts, but we also make them prioritizing public health and safety. And we want to play our part to try to bend that curve back down so that the hospitals can continue to have capacity to treat the people that become severely ill with COVID-19. So that went into effect. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I was only going to say, so that went into effect yesterday. The plan is for it to be in effect for 3 weeks. The hope is that more communities will join, and maybe even the state will follow our lead, and that it will have the impact that it needs to have to flatten that curve and allow us to get back on track reopening as the vaccines begin to roll out.
Well, I just want to say that I'm really glad that you mentioned, in addition to the rather grim news for some of our local businesses, the fact that, as we discussed last week with Jennifer Raitt, our Director of Planning and Community Development, the CDBG funding that's coming available right now and that people can apply for, hopefully that really will be very helpful to people getting through these next 3 weeks and beyond as necessary. I did want to ask you just one clarifying question before we move on, and that is, everybody, I think, who's paying attention is familiar with the fact that one of the two great sticking points in the negotiations in Washington is aid for states and municipalities. And I'm wondering whether, my reading of that is the stuff that you're talking about, that we are desperately in need of, that part of the package, which relates to aid to local aid, basically being increased by, federal government funding of that aid. Is that right?
So I was actually referring to workers being in desperate need of enhanced unemployment benefits. I think that the checks, the stimulus checks being provided to people of a certain income are going to be crucial to get people that aren't able to work based on these rollbacks, or just in general based on pandemic conditions. So I'm pleased to see that that's included, and that's what I was referring to. Unfortunately, what's being talked about in Washington right now does not include any monies for states or cities or towns, which I think I can say without being political is absurd. It's absurd, and it's a dereliction of duty on the part of everybody in Washington to not pass aid to states and cities and towns that, if they're not suffering yet, are going to be dramatically suffering and facing significant service reductions if they don't pass further aid. And there's time before FY22 for cities and towns and for the state as well, but not a lot of time. And we're in our budget planning season right now, and I know that we're waiting to hear what the state's going to be able to provide us for aid. And without federal support, the state is likely going to be seeing significant revenue shortfalls for FY22. So yeah, I mean, I honestly, it's across the board, right? The federal government needs to step up and understand that this pandemic has had reverberations throughout the entire nation, the entire economy, and they need to step up and help the people in this country that need help.
Yeah, and as you say, it really is beyond politics, because obviously the states and municipalities being affected are as much on the red end of the
Yes.
spectrum as on the blue end of the spectrum. So it's a head scratcher, to say the least. Let's just stay hopeful, I guess.
Yes.
Anyway, we've got several other topics to cover, so let's move on. One of the things that's coming up that people, I think, will want to know about for sure is to my mind, a continuation of the community conversations that took place last summer that were, I think, of great import and impact within the community, and further, kind of further iterations of those in some form were promised at that time and now are coming to fruition. So why don't you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So we've launched an invitation for people to register to a series, register for a series of racial justice teach-ins. And these have been crafted by Alensa Michelle, our race and equity consultant from Powerful Pathways, as well as working with Jill Harvey, our director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what we're asking people to do is sign up, hopefully by December 21st, to participate in a series of 5 teach-ins that would occur starting in January, occurring on January 5th and 26th, then February 16th, and then March 9th and March 30th. And what these will be focused on is really teaching a cohort of 60 people the basics of racial justice and all of the terms that surround issues of racial justice. So that as a community, we can start to build capacity around not just understanding these issues, but then taking action to address these issues. So we're calling this a pilot because we're only able to facilitate this dialogue with 60 registrants. But if it's successful, this is the type of work that we want to broaden in the community so that we can continue, not just to talk about the need to change, but to actually take action on that change. And we're doing internal work that we've talked about before, training with the National League of Cities, but we feel like we need to parallel that work with the community, and that's what we're trying to achieve with these teach-ins.
It reminds me of, in terms of a model, it reminds me of the Citizens Police Academy, which I was lucky enough to participate in its first iteration some number of years ago, in which there were 20 of us at that time in the room. You're talking about 60 here, but the reverberations go way beyond that, because I know that leaving that, spoke to everybody that I knew about my experience and what I had learned, et cetera. So hopefully that happens straight from here. And then, of course, you can scale it up as if at all possible, to reach even more of the Arlington audience. But it's certainly not a bad start, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, well, I'm excited about the curriculum. I know, I mean, Alenza is truly amazing, and she's got a great team surrounding her that's going to come provide these teach-ins. So I think we're lucky as a community to have that resource available to us.
Yeah, and with 60 people, one last word, with 60 people like that signed up for each one of these, it sounds like they're 3 weeks spaced out by 3 weeks. You can do homework and just kind of really get something from the curriculum that Alinsa has set up.
Exactly.
You can take on from there. So news to report for everybody. Interesting that it's happening as winter is setting in and as are dealing with a kind of semi-record snowfall here. But the long awaited bike path signal on Lake Street, I guess, is in effect now or soon to be. So, and again, this has been a topic of community conversation for a very long time now. What can you tell us about, what people can expect?
So I can start by telling you the signals are operational. They did go into effect. I've witnessed it. I've seen video of it from multiple perspectives. So they are in effect. And just to second what you said, I think this has been an issue discussed since I started working for the town back in 2010, and probably was an issue before that. Again, from all perspectives, from drivers who want to reduce the congestion, from cyclists and pedestrians who want better safety. So what people can expect is actual traffic signals at the intersection of Lake Street and the Minuteman Bikeway that have both signals for vehicles that are traveling on Lake Street, as well as signals for both bicyclists and pedestrians crossing Lake Street on the bikeway. Those signals are coordinated with the Brooks Ave and Lake Street intersection, which is just not even 100 yards up the street. So there's coordination between those two signals. And what we've really tried to accomplish, if we're going to boil it down to its essence, is the elimination of right-of-way ambiguity. I've used that intersection for a decade as every different type of user, pushing a stroller, riding a bike, driving a car. And the one constant is that you never know who has the right-of-way. And that's dangerous. I myself, with my then infant daughter on the handles of my bike in a seat, were almost hit by a well-meaning driver who just didn't know who had the right-of-way a couple of years back. So I've witnessed that firsthand. And what we're hopeful is that after years of study by TAC and study by a design review committee, that this implementation will reduce that right-of-way ambiguity, improve safety for all users, and beautify the area. Right, we've really daylighted that opening. We've given dedicated space to pedestrians and dedicated space to bicyclists to be able to safely cross in that area. And I think overall, hopefully, we've enhanced the user experience and safety on the Minuteman Bikeway.
And I'll just say one last thing. Again, the timing is in some ways, may strike people as odd because we're going into a time frame in which there's not going to be that same kind of congestion in terms of the people using the bike path. But by the same token, that sounds great to me because people should have a good long while now of a ramp up to get used to how things work there. And certainly you're right that there was no doubt, and having used that intersection thousands of times myself at this point, you're right that clarifying who should go when is going to be enormously helpful to everybody. So yay.
And if I told you we planned it to roll out in the winter so that it was a slow ramp up, you probably wouldn't believe me, but we didn't. It just so happened to work out that way.
Right, of course. I mean, clearly things have not necessarily, larger forces were at work here than anybody could control. So lastly, I did the aforementioned storm we are going to be digging out, all of us. We are speaking as we usually do on a Thursday morning. And it is the Thursday on which we are having 10 to 16 inches of snow here in Arlington for the first time this season. So what should people know about, in terms of an update on the storm and those who are working to keep us safe and our roads accessible?
So, first and foremost, I'd say thank you to the DPW staff that started working probably around 10 p.m. last night. Still currently working and will work likely until about 10 p.m. or later tonight, doing final cleanup. we haven't had one of these in a while, but when we have these long duration storms, it's definitely a lot of hard work and dedication by the DPW workers. I always say, people know what fire department does. They know what the police department does. And there's often a lot of praise associated with those two departments, but the DPW work often goes unseen. But it's also critical work and it's hard work. And it's in these instances where maybe we can see a little more and hopefully appreciate the effort that they put in. So, as I'm talking to you, I can see the snow falling outside my window, probably same for you. It's supposed to wrap up in the next few hours. After the snow stops falling, it usually takes DPW another 4 hours to finish their cleanup operations, do all the pushback that's necessary to make sure the roads are clear. Given the amount of snow that's fallen, probably starting tomorrow and over the weekend, we'll start an operation where we start cleaning out crosswalks and curb cut ramps so that people can traverse town, and get around on foot better. So this is the type of snowfall. It will take us the better part of probably the next 3, 4, 5 days to really get everything opened up so that people can feel like they can get around.
That's great. And I'm very glad you mentioned the DPW workers, because I think here in Arlington, and at this time in the pandemic, we have all come to recognize the value of what we call essential workers, often doing such invisible work for all of us, and yet we depend on them in so many ways. DPWs and their workers, and during a storm, great example of that on
Yes.
the local level. So. All right, Adam, we got one more update with you coming up next week and before we hit the holiday break. So we look forward to that. Appreciate your time today, as always.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And stay safe.
Thank you.
I've been speaking to Adam Chapdelaine, our town manager. This is the town manager update for this week. I'm James Milan. Thanks for joining us.